So Lara, I want to continue on our discussion on Americans' election, right? So I think the last episode we kind of talked about swing states.
Yep.
And one of the things why we are doing all these things is because we feel strongly that there is a model that can be adopted in Malaysia in terms of the system, decentralizations, and the key theme of this show, of course, right, we talk about pursuit of happiness, decentralizations, and self-determination, which is very much evident in the power, I wouldn't call it power struggle, power balance between federal and states as written in their constitution. Then, of course, the other thing we really want to talk about in this show, the next few episodes leading up to election, is how the particular election issue will impact Malaysia.
Yep.
So I think let's begin. I was just looking at our points, and compared to last episode, we kind of have a format already. It's like we talk about something fundamental, something that is like 101, which maybe some people might be aware or might not be aware. Then we talk about current issue, and then finally we can talk about how it applies to Malaysia. Kind of like when you make a exam essay, right? Point 1, point 2, point 3. But the 101 today is really, it is simple, but not so simple also, because I think we can use Malaysia as an example, right? Since the last general elections, do you feel like the political factions have changed in Malaysia?
Yeah, definitely. You even look at the state elections or even just by-elections and things like that. It's almost kind of like it's a bit unpredictable. So I felt like Malaysians are generally sort of like testing it out to see how the federal government will be responding.
There was this comment, and even the recent by-election in Johor, that people are not particularly pleased with either side. Now, of course, I think PMX, with the appreciation of ringgit and things like that, he could claim that our economy is doing well, which is arguable. But he can also claim that because of political stability, that part I think he has achieved, right, in terms of being threatened. Remember those days he was looking for every possible partners out there, and people are kind of mocking him. But now you can see it's kind of stable. I don't think Madani will fall before the next GE.
Yeah, I think that I do. We do need to give credit to PMX, but I think in terms of the strengthening of ringgit Malaysia, I think it is. Well, a lot of people are saying that, but we also have like a different kind of crisis where recently what we have heard from our suppliers is that we're talking about like raw aluminium supplies. So some of them, they are saying that, hey, it's exactly because of the strengthening of ringgit Malaysia that a lot of people are wanting to buy stuff, hence the demand is more. So then you also have an equally competing increase in the supply rates as well.
Yep.
But I felt like overall it's really because what is happening in the United States is actually affecting the strength of ringgit Malaysia. I think it is because of the weakening of US dollar that Malaysian ringgit is actually rising out. I think there is also that sort of correlation. Not saying that everything will be there. It's just that there is that aspect that I think people will need to think about as well.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, of course, US kind of reduced their interest rate for the first time for a long, long while. And, that, of course, when you talk to economists, you talk to 5, you come up with 7 or 8 points of view, right? But one of the theory, of course, was that the reductions of interest is to help Kamala because the inflation was just a bit out of control already. But, of course, there are really different points of view. But it kind of brings us back to the exact point that we've been saying, right? What happens in that election? The mother of all election this year. This year, so many elections, right? We talk about 60% of world populations are involved with election.
Exactly right.
But the American one is the mother of all, right? Because it has the biggest impact, even for Malaysia, and later we'll talk about that. But the 101, of course, we start off with faction, right? And the traditional BN versus Pakatan kind of is over already. Now you have Perikatan Nasional, then you can argue that the East Malaysian want to form their own bloc. Maybe in days to come, it will be a 3-kingdom war, 5-kingdom war. I don't know, but it's kind of evolving, right? And it's an opportunity for for the different players to kind of make their own structure. And so we go back to US, right? That people usually look at the blue and the red, right? So you have the Democrats, the blue, you have Republican, the red, but it's really more than that, right? More nuance than that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe you can kind of briefly explain to us like the four factions that we have been seeing here, right? That I mean, of course, not everyone agree with that, but I think the observations by many commentators is that there are essentially four factions.
I think you have the Republican in name only.
Yeah, Rhino, or some people will call them, the old Rhino, or they call it the neo-conservative.
Yep.
They really want the Bush, those who wanted to go for war and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you have the leftist militant.
Yeah, so I mean or progressive. Now, do you find that when you call them leftists and militant, they are kind of offended?
Exactly so.
And I mean, you look at the things, for example, we talk about ESG, we talk about certain things, mandate. During COVID time, a lot of mandate, and just a lot of government interventions. So give you an example today, I think Sarawak Premier was saying that maybe Sarawak wanted to form a centralized entity like Singapore's Temasek to manage all the assets. The first thing that come to my mind is corruption. It's like a higher level of GLC. We have seen GLC before. And it's just another easy way for them to eat.
I think it's very, very clever of them. I think that over the years, I mean, with the corruption that you have seen in Sarawak, I think it's unlike anywhere else that you have seen in Malaysia, especially here in West Malaysia. So I think there are different kind of. I think a lot of people are sort of used to, let's say, DBKL sort of corruption or even like 1MDB sort of explosion. But what happens in Sarawak is that because there is generally, I think, a lot of suppression of information where people are less. Well, I suppose they don't take so much of a keen interest in what is happening. And hey, actually, it's a good thing that we have now, like with the Sarawak government owning a stake in Affin Bank, and then you also have like all this thing. So I think people are seeing that as a progression towards self-determination. So maybe because of that, people will be actually like applauding what Sarawak Premier is actually wanting to
it's
impose.
really very, very dangerous, right? I mean, we kind of talk about it, and it's like, I mean, I do agree that it is a step towards self-determination in the sense that we are kind of, Sarawak is kind of drawing a line and just removing the control from Malaya. But it's a shortcut, because you are not dealing with the foundation properly. And you're just going to have another layer of dictatorship or control. And which reminds me many years ago, just talking to someone who was involved in government in Sarawak. And he was saying that, what if the government can give you 50 million ringgit into your personal account, 100% legal, but it is taken from taxpayers' money, but perfectly legal. And that's what over-centralization can do. It will legalize whatever illegality. And the only reason why NDB couldn't get away with that is because of all the combined information, pressure, and then eventually, of course, UMNO lost power. If UMNO had won general election in 2018, I think YNDB is still swept under the carpet. So that was kind of unexpected. But you talk about the dominance of BN, but the dominance of GPS over the years in Sarawak is greater, right? Yeah, so that's the very, very interesting. But anyway, let's just talking about the
different kind of
leftists, right?
factions.
And because I mean we kind of divert a little bit, but it's just that kind of control. I think is hallmark of them. That's why we use the word militant.
Exactly.
But of course, then you have the classical liberal, right? I mean, that's like you grow up, you talk about free speech, you talk about
the American dream,
and Hollywood, no censorship, kind of. And the classical liberalism is closer to libertarian.
Yep. But I felt like this group of people actually aren't saying that there shouldn't be any government interference at all. It's just that to a degree that it has to be like open market, free market, that everyone can basically take a shot at being prosperous in
Yeah.
their own nation. So I think this group of people are more aligned in that context.
So it is, I guess it's cultural also. And kind of, remember we did many episodes ago, political compass. So you could be like, you could have a very open economy, but the government is very authoritarian. I mean, we talk about Singapore being that. It's actually quite easy to move money in Singapore.
Exactly.
And in Malaysia, actually, it's one of the, a lot of people say it is one of the easiest place to do business. Malaysia. So then they want, okay, so we have the classical liberal, we have the leftists, we have the Republican in name only,
The
Rhino.
no-cons.
and then of course we have the latest gang, the MAGA, right?
Exactly.
So MAGA basically is now dominant in Republican Party. So you actually have all these four competing group, and it's important to understand that over the years, right? I mean, Donald Trump didn't happen overnight. And in fact, it happened way before 2016. It all started during Obama's time. And I heard a very interesting comment about Obama, because somebody was, I mean, this is a kind of joke, like, if you know, there's a NBA player, Kevin Durant, and he likes to go to Twitter and talk all kind of nonsense. But when people visit him, he said he will force people to watch Michael Jordan's video because Michael Jordan was an idol to him. Then he said, Michael Jordan, he is like one of a kind. He's like Beethoven, Mozart, those kind of people. And Obama. And then a lot of comments like, oh, no. You got that one wrong. He said Obama could have been a great unifier, but he became a great divider. So anyway, to cut the long story short, just 2 years into his presidency, the Tea Party rose up and began to challenge him. And that laid the foundation for today's MAGA. But of course, they kept on evolving, and a lot of people will look at today's MAGA and kind of like, say they are very extreme and things like that.
I think it's not extreme to actually wanting to protect the American first. So I think we have lost so much to globalism that we actually forgot how it is to be prosperous in your own land, in your own boundary, and not having to worry about the safety where you have like illegal migrants crossing over. I mean, they're not talking about all these sort of things, It's really, as in like, a lot of them, they are against illegal. I mean, you don't have that sort of border control. So I think because of that, because of the border control itself, and you have like the greatest mass deportation that is going to be promised by Trump administration if they win.
Yep.
And so that sort of thing, I think, triggered a lot of people. And I mean, especially if we are just so consumed with MSN.
Yeah, and the whole thing about border control is really the basis for self-determination. If you don't even have a border that you can shut, if you can't determine who can have citizenship. I mean, talk about Malaysia when we started off with the independence of Malaya, 57, but the Reid Commission came, recently we've been looking at Reid Commission quite a bit, not on this show, but just separately. And really one of the biggest issue is what makes you a citizen.
Exactly.
And that really ties in with border control and things like that. But of course, we have seen how United Nations tries to diminish that. Of course, United Nations is just an arm for the globalists, for the World Economic Forum. But EU, I think, is probably a better example because many nations in EU, their laws are actually subject to European Union Parliament and court. And of course, British is one of the famous country who refuse that because they basically say our common law is superior.
Yep.
But even then, Tony Blair, unfortunately, was the one who gave away much of the power. But anyway, we're not talking about Britain today, right? And since we talk about the four faction, and now, of course, another big news, which is point number 2 today, is the vice president debate, right? And typically, I don't know about you, it's like kind of like a meh event. I mean, in a general sense, right? You'll be like, okay, vice president, you're just you're like what, spare tire, for lack of a better word. I mean, if the president is killed or died, then the vice president becomes very, very important, right? But typically, they have some function. But one of the discussions, of course, I mean, more so on Trump's side, is his candidate, his selections of his vice president, right?
JD Vance.
Yeah, I mean, have you been hearing all the super negativity in the mainstream media? What do they say about him?
Well, it's just bizarre, I think. As
They
in,
say he was rude and he
exactly.
looks
I mean,
authoritarian.
what's it? Mansplaining?
Yeah. And in fact, some of them were even talking about how, he said the beard is offensive to feminism or things like that. Did you hear that? But of course, yesterday he kind of thoroughly trashed Walz, right? And I mean, even the mainstream media have to admit that. But what I find very interesting about, we will talk about the debate in a while, it's just that JD Vance was selected precisely because he is representation of MAGA. And you can even say that he is actually more MAGA than Trump.
No, I think what was interesting about him is actually, I mean, even people like Charlie Kirk, they were earlier on, I mean, you were talking about from a selection of maybe 10 potential VP picks, and then they were like just streamlining, and then I think there's some opinion that actually came out from the Trump campaign, and then they were just asking Charlie Kirk, what do you think about JD Vance? And then I think because of that sort of interaction with him, and because he was literally someone who was also from military background and things like that, and because of how he grew up and a lot of things that he carries, I think it really speaks to, you're talking about the center-right Americans.
Yep.
I mean, you're talking about VP, you also mentioned like who watch VP debate, and but you're talking about the group of people who are intellectual, who are like middle class, like slightly above average. But no, actually they are actually high income earner that you will just, when you come home, then just switch on the TV and then just watch this sort of presidential debate, because who else is gonna spend their weekdays night on watching this sort of thing except those who really, really care about America generally. And so you're talking about this group of people who are maybe somewhat offended with Trump's very straightforward sort of facade, and you have this person who is actually, he talks a lot of common sense. Not to say that Donald Trump doesn't have it, it's just that he is, a lot of the media actually calls him very, very polite, someone who actually was able to deliver that sort of punch to Tim Walz and yet do it politely, and even dealing with two moderator who exhibit that sort of toxic femininity. And he was able to like really just like, nope, I needed to correct you there. You talk about fact checking, I needed to correct you there. So it's very interesting, I think.
Very, very, very interesting observation, because I didn't watch the whole thing, but really what come across, from the key snippets, was he was basically, like, he was responding as if he is a military kind of person. He kind of demonstrated the army sensibility. I'm going to be firm, but I'm going to be respectful.
Yep.
And I think that was really his strength, and that kind of caused Walz to be very flustered. And of course, if you look at Trump's debate, right, the last round, he was actually, I felt like he was very muted, very, very constrained. I think by design, and because he wanted to reach to the center right, as you put it. And I think he was successful, but of course, some people, who wanted a more confrontational, like how he performed against Hillary. So many people said his debates with Hillary in 2016 were the best, but of course, others felt like this is a more measured. But of course, then you have Vance, who came out really, going to try to appeal to people. Because when we look at policy, when we look at economic impact, when we look at global consequences, it's not even a comparison, right? Biden-Harris administration was a disaster, unmitigated disaster. But people can't see that, because if you are constantly under mainstream media, you're going to, that emotion is there, that maybe they did well. So I really felt like Vance was sent to do some damage in this respect. But of course, I also find it, I think it was Rahim Kassam from the National Pulse who said, why this vice president debate matters is because you have an incumbent who kind of disappeared already. Then you have the replacement of the incumbent who was supposed to be with the original administration, doesn't want to engage with the media. Even the MSM were kind of frustrated with Kamala Harris, right? Come on, just show up. How bad could it be? And of course, she went to Oprah and things like that. It was bad. And did you see Oprah's expression, right? She was kind of like...
Very, very taken
aback. It's like, kidding me, right? It's like, you are a public person for so long, but you can't even play the game. So someone was saying that Walz did worse than Kamala. I disagree. You know, I think Kamala has been protected. But if she was let loose, I don't know what kind of disaster will happen.
I totally agree. I mean, actually, I felt Team Walz performed even better than Kamala Harris herself, because Kamala Harris just basically just go around and round and round, and I mean, not getting to the point at all. So before long, I mean, of course, Team Walz also did that, especially with the first question about should Israel have that right given to retaliate.
So what else that kind of that you kind of caught during the vice president's debate, you know? Then I think we can talk 1 or 2 points. They want to move to the last one. You know, how does it impact Malaysia, right?
I like that he was fact checking the
there
moderator.
Was a master move, right?
Exactly.
And you look at the clip, the moderator just looks so basically like an imbecile.
Yeah, I mean, basically they say thank you for presenting all this information.
Even if you don't want to give him the space, you should at least pretend. But it just felt like that emotion just spilled out. She couldn't contain him, and his militant discipline was there. So that was very, very interesting. And of course, the other thing where I felt, of course, JD was there to kind of deal with abortion issue and things like that. Some people criticize him for that. But really, we cover Roe v. Wade here also. And really, at the end of the day, it's not for the court, it's not even for the government, the federal government, to decide what is right and what is wrong. In terms of this kind of health community localization, the local community have to decide. So you have to let state decide. You have to let the city council decide whether they will approve abortion clinic or things like that. Because, I mean, you have different kind of belief and things like that. Unless everyone can agree that abortion is first-degree murder, which, of course, many Christians have this view, but the whole country is not Christian. So people have to understand that. So I can understand where some of the conservatives are not happy, but I think they don't quite understand what was JD's assignment. But anyway, my whole point was that he did very well to kind of link Kamala to Biden. And just say that, look, Kamala was there for 1,000 plus days, and you can't say that this is a change or something new. So I think he did drive that home quite well.
Yes, exactly.
Now we'll come to the last part already, which is quite interesting also, you know, and we're talking about how the whole election impacts Malaysia, right? Of course, we can talk about economy, but one of the big event that happens, maybe people don't think in terms of how it impacts Malaysia so directly, which is Israel attacking Hezbollah. Kaboom in Lebanon, right? And before that, the whole hacking of pager and things like that.
No, I think what was most interesting and I would say that was literally one of the best speech that Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered.
Yep.
And literally he approved
the one in UN, right? You're
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, he just approved that operation, and then he went on and delivered. So he basically said, if you strike us, we will strike you back. So I felt it was a fair sort of statement, but he did it very, very decisively, and he was just telling UN off. So I think, I mean, of course, you have Malaysian delegates that just basically protest, walk out of it.
Yep.
But even then, I mean, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, I think he was quite, I would say, I mean, for someone who is very, very passionate about the cause that is happening in Middle East, and with this incident happening, you don't really see a lot of coverage here.
But Hezbollah is more... Now, of course, when you compare Hezbollah and Hamas, both are terrorist organizations, okay? Make no mistake about that. But one of the reasons why some people give a pass to Hamas, as ridiculous as it sounds, is because they view Hamas as having more legitimacy, having won a portion of the elections in Palestine. But of course, in terms of what they do, I mean, you talk about October last year, I don't think you can even compare, right? What they did was much worse. But Hezbollah, of course, has been up north there for a long time. And basically, it's an open secret that Hezbollah is a proxy for Iran, which kind of leads us to the consequence of election. Because we look at Iran. Now, but by the way, do you know? I do have some Iran client.
Wow.
Yeah, very interesting. And I would say they seem more prosperous than during Trump's time, because less. So there's a few. Again, a very, very good article by Rahim Kassan in the National Pulse. It's free, by the way. I think we can put in the link, because I think Kassam is from UK, and he was kind of, originally from the Tories. Then he was like with Farage. So I think he understood the Commonwealth sensibility, but of course, he's very, very well versed with American politics. So he was talking about the whole, how with Biden and Harris administration, they basically empower Iran again. And that is the root of all the Middle East problem that we are seeing right now. But maybe I just share a little bit and you can talk about it. Then we kind of can conclude already.
Sure.
And of course, now I talk about my client, more prosperous in this cycle. And in fact, yeah, just a few weeks ago, they were here and said they want to open another company in Malaysia. And they're fully operate. But of course, they are a bit more regional, so they are not so affected by the political. Because Tehran is a political place, but there are other city, more religious ones, they do carpet dealer or whatever. So there are people who want to do business, they don't want to get involved. But a few things that Rahim kind of mentions is, of course, when Biden took over, they kind of took away some of the sanction. So Iran was able to sell their oil again. Then the other thing was the Ukraine war. Because when the Ukraine war happened, one of the biggest benefactor was actually Iran, because people start to buy oil from them. And in fact, this is the most ironic thing. I didn't really quite believe it, but I went to check and it's true. That because Russia is running out of weapons, they buy weapons from Iran. And you'll be thinking, like, what kind of weapons can Iran do that is better than Russia? Actually, the answer is none. But Iran can develop cheap kamikaze drone, which they use against Israel. Not working right, couldn't beat the Iron Dome. But it's good enough on the field against Ukraine, ground soldier against tank. And in fact, they say some of the American expensive tank was blown up by the drone. And even the other day, did you read America lost one of their very expensive, they call it drone, but it's more like a stealth, like a spy. It cost them like 30 million, one unit. So anyway, the whole thing is the various decisions by Biden's administration empower Iran, and Iran continue to use the proxy in Hezbollah. They also funded Hamas, by the way, which caused the whole hoo-ha there. So I guess what we're trying to say is, because you have a different president and different administration, there are consequences. So now, Lara, maybe you can share. I mean, people will be like, okay, that's so far away, but it does affect Malaysia, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you just talk about like the sanction itself. I think a lot of people don't understand the whole implication about sanction, where you just sort of like put a stop to like an embargo literally. But then because when that embargo is lifted out, I mean, literally what you're seeing is that Iran is closer to developing like nuclear power, which is crazy. I mean, they are literally wanting to start a World War III. I think if you were talking about Trump administration, during the time, I think they wouldn't dare. I mean, you're talking about a very strong president who went against North Korea, like, I mean, Kim Jong-un, and then you say, I have a bigger button. So with that sort of mentality, like you show that sort of leadership that people can, okay, I can respect to that. So with that, I think with someone as barbaric as like Iran, you do need to exert that sort of like military power and strength that cause them to like be, for lack of better words, like subservient to like, okay, let's just follow the rules and things like that. So you do have more peace during Trump's administration than ever before. I mean, you do have like 4 years of great peace that we have not seen before, and that's really credit to Trump administration. So how could people then say it doesn't matter because you have a better economy then? I mean, worldwide, you're talking about worldwide where there's a lot of economic prosperity. I mean, even people are just, I mean, people don't feel scared traveling around and things like that. You don't really have like a lot of sort of, I mean, you don't hear about so many rape cases where a lot of people are just killed. I mean, even within the American soil itself. So, I mean, that goes to show that there is that sort of strength that is being demonstrated by an administration as compared to what you see now. So with that, I think Harris can't say that, oh, okay, when I'm in office, I will do a greater change.
Yeah,
because
I mean, she
you are already
inherited the
there.
legacy. She has to be responsible. I mean, I don't know how people will buy into that. It's seriously illogical. So, but anyway, looking at the whole chain of events, the Rahim Kassan article, very, very interesting because, he kind of put all this together and it's like, hey, it makes sense. He say, you remember the botch withdrawal from Afghanistan? It was so bad. And he said that gave Russia the courage and confidence to attack Ukraine. So when they attack Ukraine, because they don't believe that the West or NATO could handle them. So of course, then the whole West, NATO and US try to commit to the whole proxy war. But that is draining, and that's literally causing German to be like, I mean, not bankrupt, but they are like on a great deficit and things like that. Then because of the Ukraine war, all of a sudden Iran is empowered. And Iran went on to fund Hamas, Hezbollah. Then last year, Hamas attacked Israel. And all the good works that was done in Abraham Accord was gone. Remember at one stage, Saudi was reported wanting to have a deal. Indonesia was reported to wanting a deal. But all these countries, they'll be like, they can't touch the whole thing because it's just like a ball of fire, right?
No, I felt actually, I mean, with Saudi Arabia, very, very close to really like coming to that place of having that deal with Israel on Abraham Accord. And just 2 months later, this whole October 7th happened. So I felt there were very, very, I mean, the Iranians were basically, I mean, the Iranian as in the Iran terrorist government. So they were very, very triggered by this whole thing, I think.
Yep. So they funded Hamas and they funded Hezbollah. And of course, Israel had to deal with it. And the other thing, of course, I mean, this is going a bit off topic. It is really, imagine if you're Israel, what would you do, right? And it's not easy, right? I mean, but they are kind of, I would say, I mean, a lot of people disagree, but I would say they are very, very restrained already in terms of what they do. Even when they say when they want to rescue the hostage, you can't just carpet bomb the whole the whole Hamas area. You have to, they literally have to send teams in, and even now they're fighting in Lebanon. And so one of the things that, of course, kind of directly affecting Malaysia is we have the Malbak team in Lebanon. It's part of the United Nations team. And the other day, I think just yesterday, government was saying that the United Nations say all these have to leave Lebanon already because they're supposed to be peacekeeper. So it's interesting. I mean, the fruits speak for itself, right? 4 years of Biden, so much chaos. 4 years of Trump. I mean, COVID affects everyone, but besides that,
yeah. I mean, I think when we talk about peacekeeper, I can't just, I mean, I can't help but just to bring out this point where I think what Israel really, really demonstrated is that they are being a peacemaker rather than just peacekeeper. I think for so long they have been trying to compromise. I think if Benjamin Netanyahu wasn't the prime minister during such a time, I think Israel could have just quickly folded to a lot of the demands, a lot of pressure from UN and even America to try to come to that two-state solution. But I think this time they were very, very resolute and really even from military perspective, they demonstrate such great strength that says that really goes to show that, hey, if you want peace, you have to pay that sort of price to really have that peace I mean, because what I think Netanyahu was saying is that who else is going to keep peace in Israel except Israel themselves? So I think that is something that I think even for Malaysia, we have to think about that as well. I mean, you can't be like wanting, like every time you just so quickly kowtow to like certain big governments. I mean, like maybe like CCP or even like other places. So with that, I think that's something that I think Malaysia has to come to think about. And even with that talk on self-determination, especially like coming from Sarawak, I think that's also another thing that we do need to consider. How do we make ourselves secure? Because otherwise, every time we're so weakened whenever the federal government just impose an emergency proclamation.
Actually, you put it so well, because the whole thing, when we talk about Israel here, and people who don't understand the issue will be like, oh, are you too Zionist or things like that? But no, we're talking strictly from a self-determination point of view. And why Hamas was able to launch the attack from Gaza was because Israel gave up Gaza years ago, and they thought there will be no consequences. When you have a neighbor that will launch RPG, if you're going to exercise self-determination, you're going to have to get rid of that neighbor. Or there'll be a no-fly zone or no travel zone, whatever. This is a consequence of terrorism and unacceptable behavior. So it's the same thing, if you want to exercise self-determination, if China wanted to kind of step into our petroleum territorial line and things like that, I can see Malaysia is resisting, but of course it's kind of like Cold War, try to go and get a loan from high-speed rail, and the other side try to rebuff the China's navy. But that's the thing, right? If we believe in self-determination, then you have to stand up, and sometimes you have to fight. So anyway, the whole topic of self-determination is so fascinating, and I mean, the American election, of course, is a backdrop, and we have a personal interest also. But I mean, in a way, the campaign has been kind of a bit muted, right? So far, I mean, it's like, but of course, you never know. In next week when we come back, maybe something major will happen. I mean, we don't have the Hollywood access. We don't have those kind of drama, right? I don't know. Is drama good or bad?
Well, let's see who wins.
All right. So next week, if you all, viewers and listeners, if you have anything at all that you want us to talk about, then we can. Because I think we're going to do it for the next 2 or 3 more episodes. Just up to voting time. And then we'll see the result and see if we even want to do an analysis or we move on from.
Maybe we should.
Maybe we should. Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for today. So until next time.
Yay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.